Hi there, this is Rachel Stone introducing transformational leadership, all elements of leadership, but especially transformational leadership, which includes learning to be a coach while you're a leader. All coaches are leaders, but not all leaders are coaches, and my mission is to help solve that. I hope you enjoy.
Well, hello there, everybody. Here we are again. This is Rachel Stone, and I'm with Sharon Curry. We're from the Trusted Executive, and we're a team of associates, and we work with the Trusted Executive. And in case you've not seen it before, you can go to the trustedexecutive.com website, and we've also got John Blakey's fantastic book all about that. And that's what we're focusing on. And my series of events are called Falling Back in Love with Your Leadership. And what I wanted to explain was that we had a previous model going back in the past where we relied heavily on the bottom line, which was solely about profit. And now, as the kindness economy emerges and everything's starting to evolve slightly in the world of business, we're looking at three pillars in holding up your bottom line with three outcomes: the triple bottom line, driving results, building relationships, and building that reputation. So Sharon Curry is my guest again today. Sharon is a managing partner. She's also a co-chair on the Trusted Executive Foundation board. We also have an expert here in CEO and executive coaching. So Sharon, I'd really like you to tell me, first of all, what you consider to be the aspects of good coaching in leadership.
I never consider myself an expert. There's lots of experts out there. I just have my perspective. I've been working with a trusted executive for quite some time now. Very used to working with 9 habits. Habit number 2, coaching. What does that actually mean? It's quite a well-known term now. People are used to the term coaching, but what I consider it to be is basically when you're looking at it in terms of an organization, coaching helps an organization shift from the command and control to a more collaborative environment. Coaching can help align individual goals with organizational goals through coaching conversations. Coaching can facilitate transparency, open conversations. It nearly always is looking for empowerment and growth of the individual that's being coached. And I always like to look at this as what is the opposite of coaching? And it's telling. And who likes to be told what to do all the time? Coaching is all about asking powerful questions, active listening, empathy, empowering other people, supporting and challenging. It's not always just support. There's challenge there involved with being a coach as well. So that's some of the aspects. You're a coach too, Rachel. What do you want to add to that mix?
When I've gone into organisations to help them move over into a more coaching style of leadership, one of the things that they say is, it takes too long. It's easy to just tell people what to do. And what I say is when you've got good coaching going on and you can see it taking shape, you have less work to do as a leader, in fact, because people feel more autonomous. They feel that they can be empowered to take action. And that's one of the outcomes that comes from good coaching, is that people become more confident. And a simple way to demonstrate this would be if you had quite a dependent person and you're leading that person, they keep coming to you, asking you questions. Gently and carefully, you can move over to responding to them with a question. And one of the things that I always say is such a quick win for a leader is to say, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. It's a small little phrase, but then that forces, in a way, some more curiosity, more thinking by the other person. So over a period of time, coaching starts off taking more time, but in the end, it gives you more time. It's one of the small things you can see in an organisation with a coaching culture is people working autonomously, feeling independent, being empowered to be their best selves. So that's what I noticed, more people taking more action because they've been coached in a way that if I go to my leader with a question, I come back with a question. I need to do more thinking first. So that's one of the things I've observed. So when you've got coaching going on from an organisation where they were perhaps more command and control and they want to go into this more coaching style of leadership, what are some of the things that get in the way, the barriers that prevent this from happening?
There could be lack of actual coaching skills amongst leaders, and that leads to potentially using the wrong kind of questions, making it a question that's a statement of what you want rather than a question that is actually opening the door for an individual to come up with the answers themselves, like you mentioned. There are closed questions. There's all different kinds of questions. When it takes time, it takes practice. That can be a barrier when there's a lack of coaching skills within that organization. It's also at a higher level when an organizational culture doesn't really recognize or value coaching and is much more results orientated, more directive. We like the reds. We like people who get things done much quicker to tell. There's a barrier of resistance. People sometimes don't want to be coached. I might have to be open. I might have to say things that I really don't want to share. I'm not comfortable with that. It's intrusive to me. I think the biggest barrier you've already mentioned, which is time pressure, time constraints, because that can affect consistency, and where one day you're asking great questions and the next day you're telling somebody what to do, and that can unbalance people and moving back into that command and control type environment. So quite a few things that can stop a coaching environment growing and flourishing.
That's a really good point, actually, because if you become quite aware of a coaching style, sometimes it's just not appropriate to coach. Some people are not in the state to be coached, and the organisation might not be. I mean, look what happened in COVID. Everybody had to make very instant decisions to pivot and change. For example, if you were an organisation in the hospitality area, you had people that came to visit you, and all of a sudden you had to quickly say, we'll deliver, you can come and collect, we'll do takeaway. And that doesn't really lend itself straight away to, if you've got a very short time frame and it is a bit of an emergency, then coaching just isn't a good style for that environment. So I suppose knowing as well in a leadership team, when is the appropriate time to coach? Have I got the skills to coach? And also, has that person got the state ready to be coached? I think that's really important.
I think organizations should always aim to be coaching organizations, but you're absolutely right. There may be moments when you can't coach, you have to direct. And that happens more often in those emergency type situations. I'm former military. But the thing is, if you've done your homework, if you know your people and they know you, if they know that you are at heart a coach, they understand those moments. And it's not going to break trust, which is what this is all about. When you have to go into that directive mode, putting that protective shell around the trust that you've built is really important. So you have to put the time and the effort and the work in to be able to have that command and control if it's necessary.
And I think it goes back to the work in the book, which is about an element of choice. We're choosing to coach, and sometimes your choice might be affected by factors. But on the whole, if you've got it in your heart that you want to develop your team, you want to grow a culture that is about quality, is about feedback, which is about challenge in a good way, but also about delivering in a way that everybody can then, like you said earlier, align their personal development and their personal goals so that the organisation can achieve. When those things are all aligned, coaching brings about this wonderful atmosphere, and you can almost feel it in an organisation where there's an oppressive nature, where it's command and control and people are frightened to speak or ask questions. Or it might be that you're in a lovely culture where everybody's encouraged to be empowered, open. People ask questions even of their leaders. There's an element that we're building trust where you can ask questions. And it's a given that in this culture where we've got a coaching style, we answer things sometimes by asking questions, and that's allowed.
We were talking before we came on about that coaching is considered a soft skill and it's all focused in on soft skills, but coaching has a very real hard aim. It's very well researched. And what happens when organizations don't focus in on having a coaching culture is that it can become a blame focused culture, not a learning one. So something goes wrong and people close down. They look for blame elsewhere. They don't learn what they can from a failure or a mistake. They're not happy to admit to those failures or mistakes. Everything to me as a coach is just, I'm curious about that. What's happened here? What can we learn from it? How can we do it better next time? And oftentimes the culture isn't seen as safe. And where cultures are not safe, then people aren't free to share ideas. They're not free to express their concerns. They're not free to take risks. So there's quite a hard impact for an organization if they don't have a coaching culture which creates that environment for growth and empowerment and innovation and all the things that are really important for businesses today.
I'm a big fan of the kindness economy. I feel that we cannot stay the way we are. And that element, it links to another habit of the 9 about kindness, having a culture where you are asking questions. And some of that is because you want to be interested. And generally, some of it might not be related specifically to a task, but it is about that curiosity. You mentioned their psychological safety. There's that fantastic piece of work by Google, and they're saying that the single most important factor for building high performance teams is that psychological psychological safety. If nobody can speak up and nobody can ask questions, then if it's not an atmosphere for that, you won't get a great team. If we look at all elite performers in all walks of life, they have a great coach. So why wouldn't leaders choose to coach if it's proven time and time again that it works to get great results?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you about, if you're in a culture that is not that way at the moment and you're looking to develop a more coaching culture, what are some of the first steps you can take, the first ways to go forward? If you suddenly stopped being how you were and suddenly started going into a coaching culture, everybody would say, what's happened there? Why is that all suddenly so changed? So what would you recommend in terms of a process?
As a trusted executive, we always talk about the impact of the behaviors at the top. The first thing really to do is to have a good conversation at the top of the organization to see how you can role model those coaching behaviors, because that's going to have a big impact. There's other things that you can do. You can set clear expectations around, we want to be a coaching organization. We've got some ways to go. We need to introduce training. We need to develop our people to be better coaches. We might bring in external coaches in order to help us do that. But setting clear expectations around, this is what we want, providing systems to reward and recognize the behavior of coaching, having that clear commitment around this, we want to be a coaching organization. And it's not just about coaching, of course, because this whole series is talking about all the 9 habits. It's about building trust. So yes, as part of that building trust, we want to be known as a trusted organization and trustworthy leaders. Training, ongoing support for people who are trying, and coaches oftentimes have supervisors to help them. You can take on quite a lot on your shoulders when you're starting out. You've got another person sitting in front of you, and every coach that I know, they really care about that individual. So having some support and having some supervision is really important to make them feel comfortable and to keep growing their coaching proficiency. It's all about having an encouraging environment that supports leaders to incorporate coaching into their daily interactions. So really setting the bar, setting out clear expectations and saying, what are you going to do daily to coach?
Yeah, it's a really good way to look at it. And I think it leads into another one of the habits, which we will explore later on throughout this series, which is about being open and saying, actually, I'm going through this process of change as a leader. I'm going to be coaching you, but it's not something I'm familiar with. And having that bit of vulnerability and being humble and saying, actually, I'm not an expert at this, but I really want to try coaching as a new method. I believe in it and I want to deliver this, but I might not be very good. So it's about being open. Again, I think if we're looking at this from a trust perspective, it's really important to know where you are in your organisation. If trust levels are very high, it'll be quite easy to introduce something new. If trust levels are very low, it would be much harder to introduce something new, but you would most likely, dare I say, need it more. If trust is low, this is the way to go. Oh, I think I've made a catchphrase. So I think one of the things we do, the Leadership Trust Index, and I hope that people can feel that they want to go and explore that. It's something that's freely available on our website. We've publicised the link to go and get that. Measure your own level of trust and then perhaps try that by reaching out to the organisation to see if we can help you say, where are you now? Is this a good time to develop coaching as a habit and to explore these 9 leadership behaviours that build trust?
I'm going to change your wording just slightly there, Rachel. The Leadership Trust Index is a larger organisational survey. It's got a lot of research behind it, and it's quite an in-depth, and we often use that at the beginning of a process with a client to see where their trust levels are now, and then we'll work out a program with the client, and then we'll go back in and use that Leadership Trust Index in order to see how far they've come, what's their journey, and how it's impacted them. What we've got on our website, which is really fantastic for people to use, very simple, is just a trust self-assessment. We'll put a link in afterwards. It's easy to download. Just 3 questions under each of the habits. And people get quite surprised, actually, at the kinds of questions that we ask. And we use that in a self-assessment. Then we say to people, okay, well, the best way to do it is to get a 360, is to get some feedback from people around you. Find 4 or 5 people that you trust and give them some feedback on how they think that you are using the same self-assessment.
One of my habits that we'll be exploring later in the week is being brave. And I think I've been a bit brave this week with technology. I'm being open. I'm not very good with technology, but I've thrown myself in. I'm really grateful that you corrected me there. And so thank you for that. Coaching builds a culture of feedback. And they've just seen a great example of a piece of feedback to help me in my exploring these live events. So thank you very much. So what we've explored, choosing to deliver. And we've explored choosing to coach. We mentioned at the top there could be a slight conflict there. What would you like to say about that?
The biggest conflict, if you're a very results-focused organisation, that it takes time to coach. It takes more time than very busy leaders have. And it can, under time pressures or under pressures to deliver to investors, to stakeholders, leaders can resort to that command and control. And of course, we'll be talking about the habit of consistency, but people can then resort to telling. And it's a case of balancing the short-term results with a long-term investment in coaching, because coaching doesn't change things overnight. It is a long-term investment.
I think it's about, like you said there, about managing expectations, isn't it? We have a pattern interrupt. We were doing things like this. We're going to start something new. There'll be probably a few hiccups and things, but probably go down a bit, like the old Nike tick. We start here, go down a bit, come out, and we're over here. So we've got that shape where you sometimes go a little bit backwards before you go quite a lot forwards. And that's perhaps might be a journey for people when they're building this culture.
Yeah, there's some other tensions too with some of the other habits. You mentioned the kindness piece, and there is a lot of new leaders as coach. They find it very difficult because of the balance between being compassionate and having empathy as a coach, but also challenging when you've got performance issues and you have to challenge somebody to step up, to take more accountability, whatever it is. That's a tension there that some leaders find difficult. And there's that tension between being supportive as a coach, but also that development that you need to have people do. And there's also that, okay, I'm out of my comfort zone when I have to challenge somebody, and do I want to stay in my immediate comfort, or am I really looking for the long-term growth of that individual? So there's some tensions there. And the inconsistency or the consistency that we talked about, there's an element of that where one day you're coaching, the next day you're telling, and don't have time, do have time. It's very difficult. You need to create an environment, as we talked about, where coaching is a part of that daily routine and people can expect that.
And I think also it's well worth it, even if there are these challenges and these tensions, because the results speak for themselves. And what I always mark an organisation by, if I ever go to an organisation and I look round, if there's nobody doing any supervisory work, nobody apparently leading, it means they've got a great culture. Because I always think of it with a coaching atmosphere, when the cat's away, the mice will play. So the results speak for themselves. You put that hard work in at the beginning, you go through those tensions and you experience that difficulty. But what happens in the end is you get that fantastic set of relationships, you get that really good reputation, and you get really good results. So it is a long-term investment, and it's a return on that investment. That it's a gift that keeps on giving. I'm really happy that we've been able to have this conversation today. Let's keep the discussion going. And please do come back when we talk about our next habit.